from the other side of the parliament.
Yeah. I call the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Mr. Speaker, some people have 30 years of experience and some people have 1 year's experience 30 times over. And I'll leave it to you to decide which category we just heard. But where is this place called Otahuhu? Now, you know, it's a province, a suburb in Auckland called Otahu, but it's not Otahuhu. And after all this time in 2012, we really should be doing better than that. Now, I want to say, whether a believer or a sceptic, what will matter to New Zealand as an export-dependent nation is how the world sees us on this issue, and more particularly, what our international customers and markets' perceptions are of this country. That means an irrational response to international concerns could cost New Zealand dearly. But let's be honest, Mr. Speaker, what you've got in this bill, all 79 pages of it, and its size and its complexity lead you to conclude one word: Kafkaesque. And this is the master of the absurd. Have a look at it. 79 pages. This will keep an army of lawyers busy for years. Anybody in the legal profession, or at Victoria or Canterbury or Auckland law schools, Dunedin, Otago law schools, be assured you've got a job for certain when you leave university, because if we have this sort of mishmash of nonsense, then it'll be a lawyer's lifeline. Whether it will help stop climate change is entirely doubtful. Now, you've heard, Mr. Speaker, about the law of unintended consequences, and that law of unintended consequences comes through every page. Now, climate change is happening, and it's a serious issue, and New Zealand First is not in denial about it. But all strategies to address the climate change issue must be practical, fair, clearly understandable, and comprehensive. And this emissions trading scheme, as amended here, falls well short on every count. And so trying to patch up the ETS is not the answer to climate change. We maintain that the role of the state must be to strike a balance between economic progress and appropriate environmental goals. So the climate change response debate is about where that balance should be and whether the ETS is the best tool. And our policy, as we campaigned on in the last manifesto, is that we're against the ETS in principle because it doesn't decrease emissions. It just moves it around to those economies that can afford to buy carbon credits. That's all it does. It doesn't decrease emissions. It just moves around. It moves them around to those economies that can afford to buy more carbon credits. It's like making petrol more expensive instead of finding the technology to make cars that are more fuel efficient, or making cars that don't use petrol in the first place. The emissions trading scheme devised by this government now is unsustainable. Adopting an approach of market forces on this issue will not work. The ETS is just another tax on people and production. And I want to ask my friends in the Green Party, why have you gone for a scheme where all the capitalists get to run the whole show? How foolish can you be? Give it to a bunch of New York people to run. How silly is that? Will we be advantaged as a nation? No, we will not be. We do not subscribe to a Wall Street takeover of the environment and profiteering out of just one more distortion of market forces. Mr. Speaker, carbon credit banks that turn environmentalism into a speculative business is not the pathway for New Zealand. New Zealand First advocates that this serious issue be handled by government and industry working together. Industry and agriculture will be far more cooperative with a fair domestic regulatory regime. Why are we paying a fortune to some other country? In this well-understood situation, and with, look, we're not going to support what the ACT Party says, and fancy mentioning John Boscawen. Boy, I've heard of a few John the Baptist, but not John Boscawen. Now, back to my point, I got totally... In this well-understood situation, and with many sustainable energy sources being available, negotiated performance standards, government-assisted R&D and a carbon tax incentive to change are much better options than the uncontrolled financial machinations of an emissions trading scheme, where there will be no opportunity for a long-term plan of managed change and improvement. The bottom line is it's going to cost about $2 billion plus. That can be much better used to pay and repay debt. We're in need of a national understanding of the importance of climate change, but we say to those sceptics and cynics, your customers will decide what you want to do. You can take the arrogant attitude, you can forget about it, but if your customers internationally say, sorry, we won't deal with you, then you will change overnight. But we are against having a Wall Street type of operation on this critical issue. Now, you know, it's all in the manifesto at the last election, and we did do, what, 7 times better than the ACT Party? Yeah. With no resources, no provincial resources, no man in a yellow jacket running around spending money like an 8-armed octopus. No, we did it all with a simple appeal to the ordinary people of this country. And if we'd got a fair go, we'd have hosed in. We all know that. Oh, we're the real members. Well, I tell you what, we packed in our opening a hall of 800 people, and they had a telephone booth for their launch. 800 at our meeting, and in their telephone booth. In fact, it was a disgrace. Now, Mr. Speaker, I want to say something. One of the reasons that I personally pushed for and established the New Zealand Embassy in Stockholm, Sweden, was that we have a lot to learn from the Scandinavians on these issues. They are light years ahead of us on the environment, and they are light years ahead of us in terms of the economic performance. They've managed to do both. So I sought to establish a connection with the Scandinavian countries, all the 4 sexual ones, Finland, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, in the biggest city there in Stockholm. And there we are, got underway with a lot to learn from them. And now we've got the government keeping on saying, oh, look, Norway does this. Why don't you people agree with that? But here's the point. In their petulance, they shut it down. Just got in and shut it down. All of a sudden, like any port in a storm, now they mention Scandinavia on the issue of development because it suits them. And Mr. Grosser will know full well that whilst he might be travelling around the embassies, they can't wait to put arsenic in his tea, or that of the minister, because they're enraged at what's going on in that department. And a Scandinavian investment would have been very, very sound for this country. And when we get back, which will be very, very soon, we're going to re-establish it. Oh, don't worry about that. I wouldn't laugh. Mr. Banks, the last person I would laugh at is New Zealand First, because our track record is to have been within 1 seat on nearly every election from either having the balance of power or holding the balance of power. Within 1 seat. Within 1 seat. No. Mr. Banks says he's got the balance of power. Look, a bought man is never going to have any power. A bought man is always powerless. When John Key says jump, John Banks says how high. Where's the power in that? Where's the power in that? No, sir. There's no excitement, thrill, majesty. It's actually destroyed the steel and the spirit of that ACT Party, and they're on a roller coaster to oblivion. And I'm so sad that Mr. Banks would have decided that it was a good idea to come back to this Parliament, because it must be oh so lonely. Oh so lonely. Now, some of us, I know caucus meetings must be easy, but every now and again when you're rattling around the office all by yourself, you must think to yourself, what on earth did I ever do coming back here? First of all, I'm a bought man. Second, I've got to do what I'm told. And third, I have nothing to contribute anymore because nobody in the country is interested in what the ACT Party has got to say. Now, on all three things, that is a sad indictment. But back to my point on this legislation. We're against a scheme where the operators of New York can use a critical issue like the environment to their personal advantage. I know why the ACT Party would support it. I know why the National Party would support it. But I've got no idea why anyone on this side of the House would support that. So there's one party in this Parliament that knows what's going on, and we have set our mind against this because it's against our national interest and it does not advance the cause that it seeks to address in the first place. Thank you very much.
I call the Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, the irony